Yeah, good afternoon, Pat. It's been an interesting few hours so far, and I think this story is likely to run for a while and its consequences. But my immediate reaction when I heard the news, whatever time it was now, 2 or 3 hours ago, wasn't it, was one of shock. Not shock that Everton had found to have breached the profitability and sustainability regulations, but the size of the sanction, which is unprecedented. And it's quite shocking and, in my view, totally disproportionate. There's a 41-page paper published by the Commission itself, which makes for fascinating reading. And it's crystal clear that there's a technical breach here. And Everton have been found guilty fundamentally of a technical breach, and differences of opinion between the Premier League and Everton Football Club on how accounting practices should be applied. And let's just put that under a bundle of a technical breach. And the report says there's no sporting advantage. It wasn't done deliberately to gain sporting advantage, but of course the sanction could have significant sporting impact. So shocked initially, very annoyed now, but I think there's a lot of life in this story yet. There's 40 odd pages of dialogue, which was what fundamentally has been treated like a trial. And there is one sentence, Patrick, which simply says, the Commission directs that Everton should be subject to an immediate deduction of 10 points. There is no further explanation beyond that, okay? Now, interestingly, the Premier League made a submission through their chief executive, Richard Masters, which, from reading the documents, it was clear that the KC chairing the commission didn't quite like it, because it was implying, and this is how you should calculate your submission. Yeah. And so that was just changed into an advisory. But curiously, that what the Premier League said in their submission through Masters, the chief executive, was that you should get a 6-point deduction simply for breaching the rules, right? And then an additional point deduction for every £5 million you exceeded the allowed 105 million. And that's how you end up with 10 points, right? And yet the document itself says that Everton transgressed the rules by 19.5 million. Now, clearly, there's only three full 5 millions in 19, yeah, not four. So maybe that's just a bit of a faux pas by somebody. But no, it's not a faux pas by somebody, because the KC, the chair of the commission, he concluded that he would not calculate the tariff that way. He would go forward with his freedom to choose the tariff in any way he sees fit, but curiously came up with a number that sounds very similar to what that calculation would have brought. So I don't think the KC is being cautious and protecting the future, because this commission will never ever meet again, presumably, because although it's an independent commission called for by the Premier League, the appeal commission, for example, will be different people. So we're in the middle of a maelstrom of heavy technical debate through a whole range of subjects, which could actually distill down to something as simple as the interest payments that Everton have paid around monies, used to build a new stadium in a deprived part of Liverpool is now being held against us as a football club. And the consequence of that at the moment is a 10-point deduction, hence the shock and frustration. It appears to be the product of a show trial. That's what it looks like. We, the Premier League, feel the need to punish somebody, and we've got to deal with Chelsea and Man City and others down the track. So let's go really heavy on this first one and try and demonstrate that we don't need the help of an independent regulator, which is something the Premier League's leadership, notably the chief exec, seem to be against. Well, clearly, this current state is it's clearly a reference point, isn't it? It's setting a precedent, right? And because the chairs or the commission's report highlights what the Premier League wanted, which was 6 points for a transgression and then a further point for every 5 million you exceed the allowance by, then we're looking at, a direct correlation between the attempted destruction of the football pyramid in this country, which is what the treacherous six did, and what happens if you build a new stadium and get caught out by a war, a worldwide pandemic, and frankly, poor management. This is an alignment of the stars, right? Because there is no doubt that Everton were not run particularly well during the period, and that's blindingly obvious by the on-field performances. But we're also getting beaten with a baseball bat because the Premier League want to try and play politics and seek to avoid, an independent regulator. Now, interestingly, we've heard, have we not, that over the last couple of days that Chelsea have been clearly doing naughty things, if we're to believe the Cyprus papers and the like. But there's other very transparent information and very publicly available information which would suggest that if the Premier League apply the same logic to, say, Chelsea and Manchester United about points deductions over reporting periods of the last 3 years, that both those clubs are going to face a points deduction next season in excess of 25 points. Because, Chelsea over the last 3 years have lost 264 million. Bear in mind that Everton's 3 years was 124.5. So let's do the scale, really. Everton, if you go with the Premier League's calculations, we lost 124.5 million pounds over the reporting period. Manchester United, over the most recent 3-year reporting period, have lost 200 million, and Chelsea have lost 264 million. So we're looking at this as the tip of the iceberg, Patrick, right? Either, a bit like things that have happened in the sporting world for Everton, the only club that ever gets punished like this way is going to be Everton Football Club, or two of the treacherous six who tried to destroy the league, tried to destroy the football pyramid, who got off with a mere slap of the wrist. And there's no evidence, by the way, when you say they were fined, that they ever paid those fines, could face draconian points deductions that minimally will stop them qualifying for Europe. And in Chelsea's case, with maybe a 30-plus point deduction, whether it would compromise their Premier League safety at all. Now, if that's a precedent that this Premier League wants around the time it's seeking to, enhance the brand across the world, and obviously deliver international broadcast rights and the like, then they're going about it the wrong way, in my opinion. But for the avoidance of doubt, particularly for your non-Evertonian viewers, there is no doubt that Everton breached the rules, okay? But there was a significant amount of mitigation, and there seems to have been a significant amount of technical discussion with expert witnesses around how some numbers should or should not be accounting for. And therefore, there's reasonable doubt about whether the number is 124.5 or whether it's 120.8, which is what the Premier League says what it was in the first place, or the 87 million that Everton say it is. So let's wait and see, my friend. Clearly, it's going to go to appeal. And one would hope that under appeal, that at least some of these points will be removed. But frankly, the smart money a few days ago was Everton weren't going to get a points deduction at all. So who knows what will happen if politics is indeed coming into play. I think Moshiri's legacy will be one of mismanagement and not making the board more effective during his period of tenure. He has the good fortune that a most magnificent stadium on the banks of the Royal Blue Mersey, which will be seen across Europe when the Euros are here, will probably be the legacy that he quite likes. But the rest of it is not going to cover him in glory at all. And I think the sad thing is that the people culpable, if you include Moshiri as being the man who could have made changes, but he did not make changes. And those people who were running the business at the time of these transgressions, most notably, as you would expect, the chief executive officer and the chief financial officer, are no longer with the club, and indeed chose not to submit a witness statement to this commission. So when people look at the report from the commission, they will see that where there's a dispute between what was happening at the time, because Everton sought to be as transparent as they could, and Everton fans would recognise that we've been on the naughty step for a number of years now for our appalling, off-field performance of, leadership and the like. But the chief exec of the Premier League made a witness statement, and the CFO of the Premier League made a witness statement. And so in some respects, only one side of a story has been heard. And that, again, is quite damning. So for Mashiri as a billionaire, who's probably a smaller billionaire now than he was when he started in relative terms, who sought to do the right thing, but did it in the wrong way. Yes, I think if, and I don't think it will happen, by the way, but if Everton were to be relegated because of this 10-point deduction, if indeed it does stay in place, then that would be clearly the most damning of legacies known to man, that your complete and utter failure to run the business properly resulted in the ultimate sanction, which is a founder member of the Premier League falling out the league for the first time ever. Absolutely. I mean, these are, if we put this into a sporting context, a fair amount of the, if you've been able to read it, a fair amount of what this document is about is like a subjective VAR decision. Yeah. And in every place where it can't be proven in this, because the onus of proof is on Everton, of course, then it's come down as bad for Everton. I mean, I actually did read clause 135 earlier, and again for your audience, it says, and this is the Commission speaking, we agree with the Premier League that the requirements of punishment, deterrence, vindication of compliant clubs, and the protection of the integrity of the sport demand a sporting sanction. I think it's quite hilarious that this Premier League thinks it's protecting sporting integrity by doing this to this football club at this time, when it knows that, A, the biggest part of debate on this is about the building of a football stadium, which clearly gives no sporting advantage whatsoever. And actually, this report itself says it's clear that Everton did not breach the rules deliberately. And yet we have other clubs, notably Manchester City, and I mention them by name because they were called out for their behaviour prior to Everton, and yet there's no sign whatsoever of sporting integrity being protected by bringing them to the courtroom. So I think the Premier League have opened Pandora's box. All the clubs are in the tunnel, and at the end of the tunnel, you meet one of these commissions. And I just think that, as I said at the beginning, Patrick, it's very easy for anyone listening to me talk going, well, I'm an Evertonian and I'm really pissed off, pardon my French, with such a large point deduction. I have no doubt that we will not be relegated this season. No doubt whatsoever, right? The team and the management and the sporting side is in a far better place now than it's been in many a long year. We will be safe, in quotes, from relegation, and probably miss relegation by more points than we've missed in the last 2 years. We've been to the well as Everton fans. We've really suffered about the ineptness of our sporting side, but the sporting side is getting sorted out. And so perversely, this points deduction is not as emotive to us as Everton fans as it might have been if the policies and the procedures of the Premier League were in place and they'd been able to bring us to court quicker. And I mean, I think that's the thing that might upset clubs like, be it Watford, Burnley, Leicester, whomever, who all believe that they wouldn't have got relegated if this had all happened sooner. Sadly, we will never know. And there's a fair amount of precedent inside the document about the response to that is, well, things are what they are, and you just have to suck it up. And that's how the Ukraine war, that's how COVID, that's how the sanctions applied to an Everton sponsor have all been interpreted by the Commission. That's normal business hurdles that you have to overcome. It is interesting, though, Patrick, that when Everton were referred to an independent commission, the Premier League did not have any method whatsoever for calculating what the punishment would be. And yet they sought to influence the commission by creating one as recently as August. Now, that the problem they have is the KC and the Commission chose to ignore their guidance, probably for the very sensible reasons that Everton had already been called to court before they changed the rules. But those rules, which were put in place in August, should, but I suspect they won't, apply to clubs like Chelsea and Manchester United, who have made huge losses. And it's shocking. They've got themselves as a Premier League into a real interesting place because they appear to have opened Pandora's box. And of course, they can't close it now. And the next Premier League game for Everton is at Goodison Park, and it is against Manchester United. And I think people throughout the world will see what Everton fans think of this. But we as fans are talking about the policy and the process and the procedures of the Premier League that we're objecting to, because fit for purpose sanctions would not have us with 10 points. And there's no chance, of course, that the appeal commission is going to convene anytime soon. So this will hang over Everton now, perhaps for a good chunk of the season, but it will also hang over those clubs who think Everton getting 10 points might actually stop them getting relegated. Sheffield, Luton, Bournemouth, obviously, those clubs won't know how many points they need to be safe until this appeal is done by. It's crazy. It's totally crazy, my friend. It really is.